deep within the humid and shadow-filled heart of South Carolina lies a stretch of land that locals have feared for generations. The Scape Ore Swamp is a place where the cypress trees stand like ancient sentinels, and the black water hides secrets that refuse to stay buried. It is a landscape defined by its oppressive silence and the thick humidity that clings to the skin like a wet shroud. For decades, the residents of Lee County have whispered about things seen in the periphery of their vision. They speak of large shapes moving through the reeds and eyes that glow with a malevolent red light in the darkness. This is not merely a story of a monster, but a testament to the primal fear that exists when civilization borders on the untamed wilderness. The swamp is ancient, and it watches those who dare to cross its borders. The history of Bishopville and its surrounding areas is steeped in agricultural tradition and the quiet rhythms of rural life. However, there is a darker undercurrent that flows beneath the surface of this polite Southern society. Long before the events that captured national attention, there were rumors of a beast that stalked the waterways. Indigenous legends from the region spoke of reptile men who guarded the sacred grounds of the swamp. These stories were often dismissed as folklore or cautionary tales meant to keep children away from the treacherous mud and water. Yet as the 20th century progressed, the stories did not fade away. They evolved and took on a more terrifying physical form. The swamp remained a place of mystery, where the laws of nature seemed to bend and warp under the cover of night. It was the summer of 1988 when the legend violently crashed into the modern world. The heat was stifling, and the air was thick with the sound of insects buzzing in the darkness. The small town of Bishopville was asleep, but the roads that cut through the swamp were never truly empty. These lonely stretches of asphalt served as the arteries of the county, connecting isolated homes to the main town. Driving these roads at night required a certain level of nerve, as the headlights would only cut a narrow path through the consuming blackness. The trees on either side formed a tunnel that felt like it was closing in on travelers. It was on one of these roads that a young man named Christopher Davis would experience a terror that would change his life forever. Christopher Davis was 17 years old and worked the night shift at a fast food restaurant called McDonald's. He was a responsible young man who was simply trying to make his way home after a long shift. The date was June 29th, and the time was roughly 2 in the morning. Christopher Davis was driving his 1976 Toyota Celica, a car that had seen better days, but was reliable enough for his needs. As he navigated the winding roads near the Scape Ore Swamp, his mind was likely on the comfort of his bed and the sleep that awaited him. He had no reason to suspect that he was driving straight into a nightmare. The road was empty, and the only sound was the hum of his engine and the tires on the pavement. Suddenly, the rhythmic hum of the drive was interrupted by the violent flapping sound of a flat tire. Christopher Davis cursed under his breath as he felt the steering wheel shudder in his hands. He pulled the vehicle over to the side of the road, near the murky waters of the swamp. The location was desolate and far removed from the nearest street lamp. He stepped out of the car and into the suffocating humidity of the South Carolina night. The silence of the swamp was heavy and broken only by the chirping of crickets and the croaking of bullfrogs. Christopher Davis retrieved his jack and spare tire from the trunk and set to work. He was efficient and moved quickly, wanting to get back into the safety of his car as soon as possible. As he tightened the last lug nut on the wheel, a sensation of dread washed over him. It was the primal feeling of being watched by a predator. Christopher Davis stood up and wiped the sweat from his brow, peering into the dense line of trees that bordered the road. The moonlight filtered through the Spanish moss, casting long and twisting shadows on the ground. At first, he saw nothing but the swaying branches. Then his eyes locked onto something that made his blood run cold. Roughly 30 yards away in the field, adjacent to the road, a pair of red eyes glowed in the darkness. They were not the eyes of a deer or a dog. They were high off the ground and burned with an intensity that felt intelligent and cruel. Christopher Davis froze, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. The creature stepped out from the shadows and into the pale moonlight. It was a bipedal monstrosity, standing over 7 feet tall. Its body was covered in green scales that glistened with a wet sheen. The creature had powerful muscular legs and arms that hung down past its knees, ending in 3 clawed fingers. Christopher Davis stared in horror as the beast snarled, revealing rows of sharp teeth. This was not a man in a costume. The way it moved was too fluid and too powerful. The creature locked its gaze on the terrified teenager and began to move toward him with terrifying speed. Panic seized Christopher Davis, and he dropped the tire iron. He scrambled back into his car and slammed the door shut, engaging the lock, just as a heavy thud shook the vehicle. The creature had crossed the distance in seconds and was now attacking the car. Christopher Davis fumbled with his keys, his hands shaking violently. He could hear the sound of metal being torn and the guttural growls of the beast outside. He managed to ignite the engine and threw the car into gear. As he pressed the accelerator, the car lurched forward, but the creature was not done. It leaped onto the roof of the Toyota Celica with a force that dented the metal and caused the suspension to groan. The teenager screamed as he saw the long green fingers curl over the windshield. The creature was clinging to the roof, trying to claw its way inside. Christopher Davis swerved the car violently from side to side, trying to dislodge the monster. The car careened down the dark road, reaching speeds of nearly 40 miles per hour. He could hear the creature scraping against the roof and felt the weight of it shifting above him. It was a battle for survival played out on a lonely road in the middle of nowhere. Finally, after a sharp swerve and a sudden burst of speed, the creature lost its grip. It tumbled off the back of the car and rolled onto the asphalt. Christopher Davis did not look back. He pressed the gas pedal to the floor and sped toward the safety of his home. His mind was racing, unable to process the impossibility of what he had just survived. When he finally pulled into his driveway, he sat in the car for a long time, trembling and gasping for air. He was terrified that the creature had followed him. Eventually, he mustered the courage to go inside and woke his father. He was hysterical and could barely form coherent sentences. His father attempted to calm him down, but the fear in his son's eyes was undeniable. They went outside to inspect the car, and what they found silenced any skepticism. The side mirror of the Toyota Celica had been twisted and mangled, as if crushed by a powerful hand. There were deep scratch marks gouged into the paint on the roof and the fender. The metal was torn in a way that no ordinary animal could achieve. It looked as though a machine had ripped through the steel, but the marks were organic and uneven. Christopher Davis knew that he had to report this. The next day, they went to the Lee County Sheriff Department. This is where Sheriff Liston Truesdale entered the story. Sheriff Truesdale was a respected lawman known for his no-nonsense attitude and dedication to his community. He listened to the story with a skeptical but open mind. Sheriff Liston Truesdale had heard many strange tales in his time, but this was different. The fear in Christopher Davis was genuine. The boy was not seeking attention or fame. He was traumatized. Sheriff Truesdale inspected the vehicle himself. He saw the claw marks and the damage. He knew that a human hand could not bend a side mirror bracket in that manner without tools. The scratches on the roof were consistent with something digging in for a grip. The sheriff decided to take the report seriously, although he was careful not to cause a panic. He filed the report and began an investigation into what happened on that dark road near Scape Ore Swamp. News of the attack spread through Bishopville like wildfire. The story of the lizard man was born. At first, many residents laughed it off as a tall tale or a prank. However, as more details emerged, the laughter died down. Locals began to report other strange occurrences. People claimed to have seen a large creature lurking near the swamp water. Others reported hearing strange, high-pitched screams in the night that did not sound like a bobcat or a fox. The atmosphere in Lee County shifted from skepticism to unease. The swamp had always been a place of mystery, but now it felt like a place of danger. People began to lock their doors and avoid driving near the water at night. 2 weeks after the Christopher Davis incident, the Sheriff Department received another call. This time, it was not a direct attack on a person, but on a vehicle. A local couple had reported seeing a strange creature near their home. When deputies arrived, they found strange footprints in the soft mud. The prints were three-toed and measured 14 inches in length. They were pressed deep into the earth, suggesting a creature of immense weight. Sheriff Liston Truesdale ordered plaster casts to be made of the prints. The existence of physical evidence sent a shockwave through the community. This was no longer just a story from a frightened teenager. The footprints were analyzed by biologists and wildlife experts from the state. They were baffled. The prints did not match any known animal indigenous to South Carolina. They were not bear prints, nor were they alligator tracks. The anatomy suggested a bipedal creature with a heavy stride. The mystery deepened, and the media frenzy began. News crews from all over the country descended on the small town of Bishopville. Reporters stood in front of the swamp, broadcasting live updates to a captivated nation. The lizard man had become a phenomenon. The quiet roads of Lee County were suddenly filled with monster hunters and curiosity seekers. Despite the media circus, the fear for the locals was very real. In August of that same year, an airman named Kenneth Orr, stationed at Shaw Air Force Base, came forward with a story. He claimed to have encountered the lizard man on the highway and had shot at it. He even presented scales and blood as evidence. The excitement was palpable, until Kenneth Orr later retracted his story, admitting he had fabricated the evidence to keep the legend alive. He was charged with filing a false police report. This hoax cast a shadow of doubt over the entire situation. Skeptics used it as proof that the lizard man was nothing more than mass hysteria and imagination. However, the hoax did not explain the damage to the car of Christopher Davis, nor did it explain the initial footprints found by the deputies. Sheriff Liston Truesdale remained vigilant. He knew that while some people might seek attention, the initial encounter had a ring of truth that could not be ignored. The attacks on cars continued sporadically. A family named Rawson reported that their vehicle had been mauled while parked overnight. In the morning, they found the front bumper torn off and deep bite marks on the fender. The metal was pierced as if chewed by powerful jaws. It was a chilling reminder that something was still out there. The Rawson family incident reignited the fear. The bite marks on the car were examined, and they did not match the dentition of a dog or a coyote. The sheer force required to tear a bumper off a car was immense. Locals speculated that perhaps a genetic mutation or an escaped exotic animal was to blame. Some theories pointed to an escaped orangutan or a bear with mange standing on its hind legs. Yet none of these explanations fit the description given by Christopher Davis. He had been adamant about the green scales and the 3 fingers. The description was too specific and too alien to be easily dismissed. As the months turned into years, the sightings became less frequent. but they never fully stopped. The lizard man became a part of the local identity. Merchandise was sold, and a museum exhibit was created. But for those who lived near Scape Ore Swamp, the humor was a defense mechanism. They laughed during the day, but at night they watched the tree line with suspicion. The swamp is a vast and unforgiving landscape. It is full of hiding places where a creature could remain unseen for long periods. The dense vegetation and the black water provide perfect cover for something that does not want to be found. In 2008, the legend resurfaced with a vengeance. A couple in Bishopville woke up to find their van absolutely destroyed. The front fender was chewed apart, and the grille was ripped out. Blood traces were found on the vehicle. The sheriff department, under new leadership, but still respecting the old files, sent the blood for DNA analysis. The results came back as unidentifiable. It was not a dog. It was not a human. It was not a bear. The results were inconclusive. This renewed the mystery and brought the lizard man back into the headlines. It seemed the creature had returned, or perhaps it had never left. The 2008 attack bore striking similarities to the events of 1988. The violence inflicted on the vehicle was identical. It was an act of aggression against a machine. Why the creature attacked cars remained a subject of debate. Some believed the heat of the engine attracted it. Others thought the metallic reflection angered the beast. Or perhaps it was simply territorial behavior, attacking anything that encroached on its domain. The Rawson family, whose car was destroyed in the later attack, described hearing the same heavy thuds and scratching sounds in the night that Christopher Davis had heard decades prior. The psychological toll on the witnesses was heavy. Christopher Davis struggled with the attention and the ridicule for years. He stood by his story until his untimely death in 2009. He never wavered in his description of the monster. To him, it was not a legend or a joke. It was a memory of a near-death experience. The trauma of that night on the lonely road stayed with him. He was the boy who looked into the eyes of a monster and lived to tell the tale. His testimony remains the cornerstone of the lizard man legend, providing the most detailed account of the creature. Skeptics argue that the human mind is capable of creating monsters out of shadows. They suggest that Christopher Davis saw a bear, and his panic-filled mind distorted the image. They argue that the car damage was caused by loose machinery or a collision he wanted to hide. But these explanations fail to account for the collective experience of the town. They do not explain the consistent descriptions from unconnected witnesses over a span of 20 years. They do not explain the unidentifiable DNA or the sheer number of mauled vehicles. There is a tangible reality to the events that cannot be easily explained away by psychology alone. The Scape Ore Swamp itself seems to be a character in this story. It is an ancient ecosystem that feels disconnected from the modern world. The water is dark and still reflecting the twisted branches of the cypress trees. It is a place where time seems to stand still. If a prehistoric relic or a new species were to hide anywhere in South Carolina, this would be the place. The swamp covers a vast area, much of it inaccessible to humans. It is entirely possible that a small population of unknown creatures could exist in the deep interior, emerging only rarely to hunt or patrol their territory. Sheriff Liston Truesdale retired, leaving the case officially open but unsolved. He often spoke about the strange summer of 1988. He admitted that he did not know what Christopher Davis saw, but he knew the boy saw something. The sheriff respected the mystery. He understood that there are things in this world that law enforcement cannot handcuff or explain. He kept the plaster casts of the footprints and the photos of the damaged cars as a reminder of the unknown. His legacy is tied to the beast just as much as the witnesses. Today, the road where Christopher Davis had his encounter is still there. It is quiet and lined with the same imposing trees. Drivers who pass through at night often speed up their eyes, darting to the rearview mirror. The legend has become a cautionary tale for the youth of Lee County. Do not stop near the swamp. Do not change a tire in the dark alone. If you see red eyes glowing in the brush, do not wait to see what they belong to. The fear has been passed down, ensuring that the lizard man lives on in the collective consciousness of the South. The commercialization of the lizard man continues with festivals and souvenirs, but the core of the story remains dark. It is a story of a violent encounter between man and monster. It is a story of visceral fear. The green scales and the 3 fingers are iconic imagery now, but they originated from a place of pure terror. The drawings made based on the description of Christopher Davis show a creature that is biologically plausible, yet horrifying. It is muscular and agile, a perfect predator for the swamp environment. The image haunts the dreams of those who believe. Cryptozoologists continue to visit Bishopville hoping to find proof. They set up trail cameras and use thermal imaging to scan the swamp. They look for heat signatures and listen for the distinct calls reported by locals. While no definitive photo has been captured, there have been many anomalies. Strange heat blooms in the deep swamp, and sounds that defy classification. The search is ongoing, driven by the belief that the creature is flesh and blood. They believe it is an animal that science has yet to catalog, a relic from a bygone era, surviving in the modern age. The silence of the swamp is deceptive. It is a living, breathing entity. At night, the sounds of nature create a symphony of chaos. In that chaos, it is easy to miss the sound of heavy footsteps in the mud. It is easy to mistake the splash of a large body entering the water for a fish or a gator. The lizard man benefits from this camouflage. He is the master of his domain. The humans are the intruders driving their metal beasts through his territory. The attacks on the cars can be seen as a warning. Stay away from the water. Stay on the pavement. Do not linger. As the sun sets over Lee County, the shadows lengthen and the swamp comes alive. The locals retreat to the safety of their homes, locking their doors against the night. They tell the stories to their children, keeping the legend alive. But deep down they know it is more than a story. It is a history of unexplained violence and mystery. The lizard man of Scape Ore Swamp is not just a cryptid. He is a symbol of the wild and uncontrollable forces of nature. He is the thing that watches from the dark, waiting for a car to break down. The mystery remains unsolved to this day. No body has been found. No clear photograph exists. Yet the physical evidence of the destroyed cars and the plaster casts of the footprints remain. The testimony of credible witnesses stands against the skepticism of the outside world. The truth lies somewhere in the black water of the swamp. Perhaps the creature has died. Perhaps it has moved deeper into the wilderness. Or perhaps it is still there watching and waiting for the next traveler to stop on that lonely road. The lingering dread is what defines the legacy of the lizard man. It is the feeling you get when you are alone in the dark, and the hair on the back of your neck stands up. It is the sudden silence of the crickets. It is the shadow that moves when you are not looking directly at it. The Scape Ore Swamp holds its secrets tight, and as long as the swamp exists, the possibility of the lizard man remains. The red eyes are out there somewhere burning in the night, a reminder that we are not always the top of the food chain.